Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing our tutorials of SQL, focused on MySQL and MariaDB. And we're going to change pace a little bit. We've gone through stored procedures and stored functions and looked at those. And now we're going to get a couple of issues, or a couple of sessions, tutorials, I guess. We're going to talk a little bit about approach, and it has to do with performance tuning and things like that to some extent, but also just to talk through some ways to approach queries and where clauses and things of that nature. This is going to be it's really more like not really necessarily suggestions as much as options. Because I think you'll find as you get into these things that sometimes there's certain approaches that you're going to need at certain times, and that's the way it's going to work. But there are also going to be situations where you have different approaches, and how you do it will impact speed and things like that, because your goal is to leverage as much as possible the indexes and other built-in pieces of the database that allow you to quickly query. And indexes are probably the biggest thing. And then we will talk a little bit as we get further into this about some different types of indexes and a little bit more on those specifically. But today I really just want to talk about, we're going to look at inner and outer joins. And so the first thing I want to do is we're jumping back into some of the data that we've seen before. And we had this table stats. And it just has some codes, some values. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another record in there. And the key here is value 1. Because what I had before is I had value 1, values were from 1 to 3. Now I'm going to add one that's got a value of 6, and it's particularly because this table is not tied to anything else. And we're going to go back and look at the lookup type, and based on the IDs, we only had numbers 1 through 4. So if we wanted to, for some reason, if this was just, we're just playing around with these tables, if we wanted to do select star, let's do this. Let's do select code, and well, we're going to do this a little bit. So we're going to select code from stats. So that just gives us those. But now what we want to do is we want to do stats. So we're going to alias him as S. So that's just be the stats. So we're going to do s.code, comma, l.code. And let's say we do an inner join, look up type L on l.type ID equals s.value1. So what we want to do now is we're going to say, okay, for those values in value 1, what would be the lookup type for those? Now, if we do this with an inner join, we're going to get, for each of those, we're going to get a match. But notice for our test record that we created, it doesn't exist down here because it's an inner join. It says, hey, if that value doesn't exist, then it's not part of the result set. Now, if we wanted that to show up anyways, all we have to do is we do a left join. And now we're going to see that record does show up, but it has a null value. What we're getting here, the two different result sets, is because of the inner join, it limits records that are coming back from stats. Now, that's not always what we want to do. In some cases, we're going to want essentially all of the records to come back, but like in this case, let us know if that value doesn't exist. So we could do this through foreign key relationships and things like that. We can force a value to exist. But in some cases it won't. And particularly once you get into comparisons and things like that, you're going to have and even for example, you may have things like contacts where you may or may not have an address record. And maybe you want to go through and say, okay, give me a list of all my contacts. If I have an address, I want to see it. But if I don't, then that's okay. So you could show me, for example, a null. And we can do the same thing we had for that. Show tables. What do we call address? Okay. Let's see what our address values are. Oh, so we can do the same thing. So now let's take that same one, and now instead of lookup type, let's do address, and we're going to call it a. We'll call it addr. And on addr.something equals that. And here, let's do address name. Well, let's do city, state. Oh, that's a dot. And zip. And instead of it being value 1, we're going to do it on T1 ID. One ID. Oh. So now, paste that in. So now what we're doing is we're saying, hey, if that links up to an address, let's see it. I want to see the city, state, and zip for that. Well, again, we're now seeing that we have some records that don't show up. We had 8 rows. Now we're down to, oh, I'm sorry, not 8 rows, 9 rows when we do a select star. But here we're going to get 8. So we say, oh wait, no, I do want, let me do this. It's going to be faster to do it this way. Plus then you can see it somewhere. If I do that outer join, now see that I get my city, state, and zip or null. And that may be okay because my result set I really want to see in this because it's from stats. That primary table typically says I want to get all of the records. The exception would be in a where clause. And so I don't want to limit based on my joins, then I can do left joins. And now what I can do is from there, I can do stuff like, I could do stuff that says, if it's a null, then do something else. And so I could actually say, what I want to do with this same thing is say, I only want to do it, I want to find everything where I don't have a matching address. Then I could say where city is null. And I'm going to have to do addr.city, I'm sure. Well, actually I won't because it's in 2 places, but nevertheless. So now I can take that and I can say where city is null, and that's going to show me the cases where I need to get a lookup value set up properly, where I don't have things properly matched. Oh. Let's take that, let's do that, like that, just to make sure we've got that in our little examples. So what I can do here is I can say, here's all the data, but I could actually say, hey, where is all the situations where I don't have an address? Well, now I can pull that. And this would be, in some cases, it's going to be a complex type of mapping of data where I want to do something if the data exists, but I don't if that mapping's not there. So I could say here, so I've got my left join. Oops. So with my left join, I've got tests, but I could say, hey, for all of these guys that have one, I want to get that lookup type. So I could even do there, I can say, now if I do inner join, what was that lookup type, L on L dot, what was that? L dot type ID equals, and if I do that in the actual address, which is going to be addr.type ID, I believe, then here, because I've got an inner join, I'm forcing it, and because I don't have the record from my left join for that test, then I'm still limiting. I'm not going to see the test record. But I could say, hey, if I have an address, then go ahead and give me an oh, I'm sorry, I'm not displaying it. So let's do this. So let's do lookup type.name. Let's change that a little bit. And then that's going to be, what is that, l.code. Oh, let's do this. And so now I can see the code if it exists. But now I have to, once I do that once I do that left join, if I do inner joins, then that could, if those are related to what I left join to, then I can suddenly run into some issues. Now, the difference is that we can do stuff either in inner joins or through a where clause. So, in order to, let's go back to this prior run. So here, this one, here we're getting everything back, but then we're getting rid of that. We're saying where inner city is null, or I'm sorry, address.city is null. So now we're, basically pulling all our records back, and then we're reducing the result set in the where clause. Whereas we could do it without a where, so because what we really want to do is we want to find, like, for example, we want to flip this. So instead of doing where address city is null, so we've got here, instead of our where, let's see, so this was our left join. So if we look at our left join, what we can do here, we could do that where clause and try to reduce it, or we can try to pull it separately, so that we're trying to limit the amount of records that come back. Which case we could say here, let's see, then what we'll do, instead of pulling everything, is we go directly to our where. So it's now not going to pull everything, and actually we can do this. If we come all the way back here, then we're going to, instead of even doing the join and walking through all of this, we want our what's that going to be, s dot value 1 not in, and we can do select type ID from lookup type. So now if we do that, whoop, there we go. So now we're getting our code there, and we're saying, hey, that's where it doesn't exist. Now here we're doing it with an where clause. And sometimes that can get pretty complicated, because you're going to end up having all of these selects that are out in your where clause. And that can be in itself a little bit of a problem, because you end up having a whole bunch of inner selects within a select. So what you may want to do is, and so that's so you can have that, or you can have this left join, or you can try to pull it from, let's see, what's another one? I guess that's really the two ways you normally are going to do it. You could do it again. You can pull it from a table, but if you, wherever possible, you want to avoid doing a full table. So this is something where this is going to be moderately costly because it's got this select. Now, usually what's going to happen is it's going to, because this is in the where clause, this select is going to occur once, and it's going to, it's going to be able to tune that. In some cases, it's not. In particular, depending on where you put your inner selects, particularly if you did it here, if you did it on the select side, the left side of the from instead of the right side of the where, then every record that it hits, it's going to trigger that select. And then you can have something that blows up exponentially, basically, because now you've got selects, each row, each result set triggers yet another select, and it can get out of hand pretty quick. So typically what you're going to do there, particularly if you've got like a complex select, is instead of doing an inner select, is that you can actually create a source. So I can do that. And I could do inner join. Instead of a table, I can actually do this. I'm just going to call him source. And I could say on source, because I can only access what I select here. So on source.typeid equals s dot, what was that? That was going to be value 1. So in this case, instead of, I could actually limit some of these things out. I can put a where within here. So I could say where like type equal, where are my types? We're like, code equals bus. I guess that's all of them in this case. So that's probably not as useful, but if those were different ones, then I can pull that. Then I could actually limit, instead of pulling everything from lookup type, I could do it across only a couple and do my inner join there. If I do it here, what we're going to see is the same result we saw before. Yep. Except for now I'm just not displaying all that extra crap. Because here, instead of an inner join of lookup type, I'm just doing the type ID, so it returns a little bit less, but it doesn't really matter. What I would really want to do is say like where, what was that? Let's say, well, I can just do it with here. So lookup type, let's go look at those values real quick. Somewhere in here, well, let's just do this. Lookup type. So let's say where code equals home. Let's say, so now what I'm doing is, instead of doing an inner join that's going to do a table scan across that, I'm just going to say, let's do it where all the home addresses are, and we're going to find that there's only a couple there. Oh, and so there were. So now we're getting this lowered result set, and instead of where I could instead move this out. So let's see, where did I have that before? Here we go. So I could even do here where address, that was where addr.city. I can just change it. So I can say, even with this left join, I could say where address, oh, that's not on the lookup. Here we go. So I can actually play around with these quite a bit. So here, inner join on that, and then I can say where l.code equals home. Okay, so I get those. But now also I could inner join. I could do a left join on that, and I could say, hey, go ahead and show me all of them. But only if it's home do I want to see something. From stats, left join that on that. Oh, and in this case, I'm still going to, that changes up a little bit because l.code is going to be null. So I could say or l.code is null. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the non-maps or the homes. So we can move our wheres around quite a bit, and that will make a bit of a difference in the performance tuning. Now we're only dealing with a half dozen records or something like that at most, so you're not going to see it. But if you have a database, even with hundreds of records, definitely if you get into thousands or tens of thousands or millions, then you can see some dramatic changes depending on where you put your where clause and how you do indexes, which is something we will refer to. We'll get into that a little bit later about how to do some indexing and where to make sure that we have indexes or where it may be beneficial to do so. I think that'll do it for now. I just wanted to play around with those a little bit. I don't have complex examples yet in our test data, and I will probably find a nice little demo database that we can use. I may even provide you one so we can get a little deeper in some of our more complex types of queries. That being said, we'll wrap this one up. So go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time.